Ever find yourself just trying to connect the dots? Like, why do we do the things we do? What makes us interested in certain stories or people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, today we're diving into a couple of really different sources that might just offer some clues, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating pairing we've got. First up, there's this Spotify podcast. Why Are We Like This? A Heartstopper podcast.
Okay.
It's basically, two huge fans just really digging deep into the Heartstopper series.
Right, like a fan rewatch kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then, completely different vibe, we've got the info page for a book called Why Are We Like This? An evolutionary search for answers to life's big questions. That's by Zoe Keene.
Exactly. So yeah, very focused fan podcast on one side, and then this big science book tackling, well, basically the huge question of why humans are the way they are.
Seems gold is apart, doesn't it?
It does on the surface, but what's really caught our eye is that title question, right? Why are we like this? Both are using it.
Oh.
So our mission today is let's put them side by side, the super specific fan dive and this broad scientific inquiry. What happens? What can we learn about ourselves from looking at both?
Yeah, I like that. So both asking that same fundamental question, but from totally different starting points. Like for the podcast hosts, Alyssa and Ashley, it sounds like the question comes from being just so in it, deep in the Heartstopper world, trying to figure out why these characters, these moments hit so hard. They even describe themselves as two bisexuals who can't stop talking about Heartstopper.
Yeah.
So that personal angle is definitely there.
Right. So it's a really personal, media-focused lens on the why. And then you flip over to Zoe Keene's book, and bam, the scale just explodes. The description throws out these amazing questions. What can snorkeling at Shark Bay tell us? How do stick insect sex lives connect to ours? Why do we even sleep?
It's almost funny, the contrast podcast talking about, teenage crushes and coming out stories.
Right.
And the book is talking about snorkeling with sharks and evolutionary biology to understand, well, us. It mentions evolutionary paradoxes. Sounds like it's really getting into the tricky bits of life.
Absolutely. But maybe, just maybe, they're both trying to get at the same core stuff. Think about the podcast themes.
Okay.
Meeting someone, crushes, first kisses, secrets, navigating friendships, sexuality. They even have that big bisexual bonus episode.
Yeah, all those intense, relatable human moments. Things most of us, go through or remember really clearly. Attraction, social stuff, even the hard parts like bullying. They feel kind of universal.
Exactly. And that's where it gets interesting to bring in the book's perspective. Why are those things so universal? From an evolutionary standpoint, well, forming bonds, being attracted to people, that's probably not random, right? It likely helped our ancestors survive, team up, raise kids.
Okay, that makes sense. Survival.
Yeah. And even navigating all the social complexities, the conflicts, there could be evolutionary reasons for how we handle that too. I really like that quote mentioned from Dr. Carl Krasnolnicki about evolution being not perfect, just good enough.
Right.
It kind of suggests that maybe all the messy, imperfect parts of our relationships, they're just part of the package.
Yeah.
A side effect of what worked for survival, not necessarily for perfect happiness.
That's a really interesting frame. It makes you think, too, about why we get so into dissecting stories like Heartstopper.
Yeah.
Why does that podcast even exist? Their whole thing is reliving moments, understanding the characters more deeply. It's not just watching. It's like active analysis, trying to figure out why we connect with it.
Precisely. It shows how powerful stories are for helping us figure ourselves out. They talk through the show, build a community around these shared feelings, and then think about the book. Tegan Taylor calls it a witty and inquisitive exploration, sparking wonder, curiosity, and tenderness. So one uses fiction, the specific story of Heartstopper, to explore emotions and connections. The other uses science, stories about, stick insects and whales.
Yeah.
But maybe they're both trying to connect us to something bigger. One connects us to the emotional world of these characters, the other to the sort of grand story of life on Earth.
So different kinds of stories, but both trying to answer, why are we like this? One zoomed in, super personal. The other zoomed way, way out.
Exactly. And both seem to tap into that human need for connection, whether it's connecting with other fans who feel the same way or connecting with our place in the whole web of life.
It also brings up how they look at identity and behavior differently. The podcast, like to say up front, really focuses on queer identity. That bisexual panic episode, or the bonus one, They're clearly making space for that specific experience.
Which is so vital, right? For representation, for community, people seeing themselves reflected.
Totally. And then the book.
Mm,
It's taking this massive evolutionary view. It's probably not going to talk specifically about, say, bisexuality in the same way.
probably not.
But by looking at the deep history, the forces that shaped all life, maybe it gives a broader context for why there's so much diversity in how humans are or how we behave.
That could be it. While the podcast gives that really valuable, specific look at identity within like modern culture and this specific story, the book might offer a more foundational look,
Okay.
like the biological and evolutionary roots of variation itself, understanding the pressures that shaped our species.
Yeah.
Maybe that helps us appreciate all the different ways people experience life and connect with each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like the podcast is the close-up, the personal experience, and the book is the wide angle, the historical context.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly, both seem to demand you go deep.
Right. You mentioned the podcast episodes are often pretty long, over an hour sometimes,
Yeah, they're not just scratching the surface. They're really committing to analyzing the source material.
which sounds a lot like what the book promises, too, taking readers behind the scenes of the evolutionary paradoxes. That sounds like a proper deep dive into some complex science.
Definitely. And I think that connects back to you listening right now. When you choose to listen to something called a deep dive, you're looking for more than just a quick summary, right?
Yeah, you want that richer understanding.
Exactly. Whether it's the tiny details of fictional relationships or the huge sweep of evolution, there's something satisfying about really digging in and finding those deeper layers.
So it turns out, maybe it's not that strange to put these two side by side. A fan podcast about a sweet queer romance story and a science book asking life's biggest questions.
Yeah, they share this core quest, this fundamental question. Why are we like this?
Right. The Heartstopper podcast gets into all the nuances of connection, that feeling of first love, finding yourself, all through the lens of this one story, but reflecting things lots of us feel.
Mm-hmm. And Zoe Keene's book tackles that exact same question. Why are we like this? But by looking way back at our evolution, at other animals, at the sort of biological reasons for our quirks.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
how could understanding both our own gut reactions to stories and our deep evolutionary past, how might that give us a fuller picture of, well, us?
Yeah, and what other things that seem totally unrelated might actually connect if we look closely enough. Definitely something to chew on.